So the question is, why is America so beautiful?
Because of our veterans.
Because it attracts people like David Silberman, who had the courage to stand up to those oppressors, whose ignorance and hatred would deny the Jewish people their right to exist. I'd like to introduce David Brodsky, who will deliver a few remarks about this true hero of all freedom-loving people.
I just want to ask Mr. Silberman if you could just please stand so people know who you are and where you are. And so now that we've all applauded, let's find out why. Mr. Silberman was born in Latvia. He's from a town called Prēļi, which is one of the oldest towns in Latvia. Had a sizable Jewish community before the war. And when Mr. Silberman was a child, his parents managed to get him out before they escaped, before the Nazis came in. When he returned to Prēļi, there were almost no Jews left. And it was really at that point when he recognized what that was about and where that was coming from, that he started his life's mission. And since then, he's been an untiring fighter on behalf of his fellow Jews and against tyranny and oppression in general. Just as an example, and this is an insane story, in 1971, he was one of the organizers of a sit-in hunger strike in the Kremlin. People don't do that. People don't walk into the Kremlin, sit down and demand things and walk out alive. He walked out all the way to Israel and opened the door for the other Jews to get out of the Soviet Union, including, by the way, people like my parents, who came to this country in the 70s thanks to the actions of Mr. Silberman. But he didn't stop there. In Israel, he took a job working in the shipyards, putting his education to good use. From Israel, he was sent by the Jewish Agency to sell Israel bonds in America to support the state of Israel. But in 1973, when the war broke out, he rushed right back to serve in the reserves. Now, 4 years after that, he moved to New York, where he still lives. And he actually was working for the city of New York as an engineer. Now, this is obviously a very abbreviated biography, and we'll get to that longer one, I promise you. But my contact with Mr. Silberman started over a book that he wrote, a book called And You Saw It. It's a collection of accounts of Holocaust survivors, mostly from his native Latvia, and it's been my privilege to work on the translation of that book into English. All of these years, he's been collecting these stories that nobody else has, that nobody else knows. And he's been publishing them, and he's been telling the story of all of us, of all of these survivors. And they're not all horror stories. Some of them are actually very sweet. Some of them are very amusing. He gives a 3D, fully dimensional picture. But he's telling stories that a lot of people would prefer weren't told. And it was as a result of his work that the Latvian government actually acknowledged the collaboration of many of their people with the Nazis during the Holocaust. Not only did they acknowledge it, they built a museum to a man named Janis Lipke, who was essentially rediscovered by Mr. Silberman. And Janis Lipke saved dozens of Jews. He was a dock worker. He wasn't anybody. He wasn't a rich man. He wasn't, a powerful man. He saved over 50 Jews, risking his own life. We wouldn't know about that if not for Mr. Silberman. He changed Latvia into the country with the least incidence of anti-Semitism in Europe. We're talking about Eastern Europe here. This is a serious, serious change. So I think, we've heard from heroes, we've talked about heroes today, and I think that it's time that we recognize a different type of hero, another hero, but also a true hero. And in the spirit of the hour, I would ask that we give a round of applause in gratitude to this lion from Latvia for all that he's done.
There's a gentleman here called Michael Gressel. He's sitting over there. When I went around promoting this meeting, and I went with friends door to door in our community to tell them, come here, because something from here is going to start in America. Our veterans are now able to tell their stories to the youth in our colleges, to tell them everything they have is for the things they fought for. And it's about time. If anyone's going to change this, it's their stories. It's them talking to our children, letting them know why they're free and why they're prosperous. So I was out there and I met Mike, and he asked me a very wonderful question. He said, the question, what was the framers' intent for our country when they founded it? Wow. What was the framers' intent? So we started to talk. I'm going to end this very quickly because we had a wonderful keynote speaker. We learned enough, actually, to fill our plate. But what I heard and what I told him was, the intent of our founders was they had no tolerance for tyranny. They escaped from tyranny. Someone was telling them their God inalienable rights. You couldn't have it. You couldn't have your religion. None of it. And so ultimately, the Constitution was formed as a document, as a declaration of war on tyranny. And the reason we're free today, and the reason we're diverse, is because each one of us share one common goal. We do not tolerate tyranny. We respect each other. But those who come to take away our freedoms, we stand.
Shall not pass.
We stand. Now everyone here is wearing a Jewish star, right? I just want to say one last thing before I close it. I'd like you to take off your Jewish star. Take it off, please. Everyone. You're wearing it? Take it off. Now, who are we? We're citizens who are patriots. It wouldn't matter if you're Jewish. It wouldn't matter if you're Christian. We stand against tyranny. And we stand against those, like Kathy said, who are despots. Because originally, that was the first original sin. We didn't listen to God. They enshrined themselves and told people, listen to me. And that's what tyranny is. That's the root of tyranny. And the root of our Constitution is a stance against that tyranny. So, those who stand against tyranny truly stand with God. That's what makes America great for me. Thank you very much.